Welcome to France24 for the interview with one of the rising stars of international politics, Tzipi Livni, who is the head of Israeli diplomacy. She has been called the new Golda Meir and has been received by President Nicolas Sarkozy in Paris the very same day that British journalist Alan Johnston was freed following 114 days of detention. This liberation was obtained by Hamas. The president of the Palestinian Authority had remained powerless. One can imagine the political benefit that the Hamas movement could reap from this liberation after its takeover of the Gaza Strip. The most urgent matter now for Israel is the situation in the Palestinian territories. In this interview, recorded just a few hours before the BBC correspondent was freed, I asked Tzipi Livni if there was a risk that the Hamas could take control of the West Bank after taking over Gaza. Here is what she said.
This risk is a real risk. We only have to remember that whereas Israel left completely the Gaza Strip, we still have forces in the West Bank, which means that the ability of terrorist organizations to take over uninterrupted, unimpeded, is much more problematic.
Some people are talking about the creation of an Islamic State. They're referring to the word Amistan. Is this something that could become a reality?
I hope not. This depends greatly on the moderate Palestinian element and on the Palestinian people itself. The Palestinian public must make a choice that has to do with its own future. How do they see their future? Do they want to see the future of their children going to schools and to mosques and learning hatred? Do they want teachers to tell their children that the future is by becoming a suicide bomber and blowing off? And when in Israel, when they reach 13 or 14, do they want their daughters only to wear veils and not to be open to the free world? Do they really want peace with Israel? This is the real choice that the Palestinian public must make. If they want their own state, they have to object Hamas, they have to fight Hamas, they have to reject terrorists. Today we see the beginning of a chance. There's a new government in the Palestinian Authority that rejects terrorism, that accepts the principles of the international community, and that wants to promote a two-state process with Israel. Now the ball is in the Palestinians' side. Israel will help those who want to promote the idea of two states.
And that's why you decided to start up financing the Palestinian Authority by unfreezing the taxes that had been frozen for several years. You decided to pay that money so that the President Hamas can pay the civil servants.
Yes, absolutely. Israel has made it clear from the beginning that the money will be transferred once there's a government that recognizes Israel, that rejects violence and terrorism, and endorses previous agreements between Israel and the Palestinians. This is the new government that was formed. Israel, in accordance with its own policy and the international community's policy, has released immediately those tax monies.
Ms. Livni, by freezing that Palestinian tax money that could have enabled President Abbas to better govern by paying his civil servants in a timely fashion, did not Israel have some responsibility in what happened by encouraging the crisis between the Hamas and the Fatah and the takeover by the Hamas?
Absolutely not. We have to remember when the Hamas took over. Hamas took over after Israel has dramatically withdrew from the colonies in Gaza, withdrew its troops from Gaza, and decided to create an opportunity for the Palestinian people in Gaza to start building a state, to start living in peace. And we transferred to Abu Mazen a few months ago $100 million. The problem is that the Mecca Agreement, which in fact fused together into one government terrorist organizations with moderate elements, has made everything impossible.
To try to facilitate things, are you going to let go a certain number of Palestinian prisoners? We talked about a prisoner exchange or freeing 250 prisoners, and that was stopped. Is that going to happen now? And how many people will effectively be released?
Well, the answer is yes, this will happen. 250 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, will be released. We're talking about not murderers, but prisoners who are Fatah prisoners. And Israel is doing that, although we have to bear in mind that the Hamas now holds an Israeli soldier who is also a French citizen, who has been held for more than a year by the Hamas. Israel did not want to release Palestinian prisoners, but after the new government has been created, we thought that in order to convey the message that there's a difference between a terrorist and someone who is not a terrorist, someone who is in the Fatah and someone who is not in the Fatah, and in order to strengthen the new government, we thought it would be appropriate to release those prisoners as a unilateral gesture, although we didn't think it was.
When will they be released?
It's a matter of days. Sunday, I think, the government decision will be made, and thenceforth it's only a technical matter. The Prime Minister's decision is to release those 250 prisoners.
Where do you stand now with respect to Gilad Shalit that you mentioned, the Israeli soldier? Are you optimistic about that? Do you think that he can be released in the coming weeks? Hamas is now saying that they could put pressure on the kidnappers. Do you think that that can happen? Can they bring about the release of Shalit?
There are subjects that should not be discussed publicly, and Gilad Shalit is one of them. This is a very painful subject in Israeli society, and Hamas is trying to take advantage of that and trying to use the pain of the families and this solidarity in the Israeli society. This discussion is being held, of course, but it is done today via the Egyptians.
But what is your feeling about this, really? Do you think he'll be freed soon? Do you believe in that? You're hopeful of that?
I hope so. I pray for it. I'm part of the hope, not only of the families, but also of the entire Israeli people. Beyond that, I don't think it's appropriate to discuss this publicly.
One word about another famous Palestinian prisoner, Marwan Barghouti. Are you in favor of releasing that prisoner?
Marwan Barghouti is in prison because he actively participated in a lot of the terrorist activity against Israeli citizens. Right now, this topic is not on our agenda, so I shouldn't talk about it now, I think. It is true that he supported from within prison the creation of the new Palestinian government. He's a meaningful figure among the Palestinians, but I do not think that this is right to discuss it now.
He could be the person you're dealing with about peace tomorrow. Would that be something you'd be in favor of?
Yes, that could be.
Why not?
The question with whom one talks has to do with the ideology of the other side. As far as we're concerned, a partner is one who meets very basic conditions. As a vision, he wants to see two nation-states. He should reject terrorism and violence, and he should accept previous agreements that were signed. These are not Israeli criteria, these are international criteria. International conditions are very clear, very easy to meet, and whoever meets them is a partner for us.
If the Hamas respected those conditions and to recognize Israel, would it be possible to negotiate with Hamas directly?
If the Hamas meets these three conditions, recognizing Israel, rejecting violence and terrorism, and endorsing previous agreements, then the answer is yes. A dialogue between us and the Palestinians is a function of the ability to reach and promote an agreement. And there's a logic behind each of those conditions. Accepting Israel, recognizing its right to exist, is a fundamental issue. If you don't recognize one's right to live, then you can't be a legitimate partner. Rejecting violence and terrorism, well, yes, of course. Terrorism cannot prevail. It cannot become a tool. And previous agreements, well, that's natural. Hamas wants to take us back to the days before the State of Israel was founded. So meeting these three conditions fully would turn the organization into just another organization like any other.
What do you expect from Nicolas Sarkozy, the new French president? Is a new page being turned? Jacques Chirac sometimes had difficult relations with Israel. Do you think it's a new era in relations between Israel and France?
I know the values of President Sarkozy. I know that his values represent, of course, in my view, French values, but they also represent a very deep understanding of the threats that the world is facing today and of the things that must be done in order to promote stability. We must understand that France, just like Israel or the entire free world, is now facing significant threats. Iran is not only a threat to Israel, it threatens the entire world. It threatens the Gulf states. Today, even the Arab world understands that Israel is not the enemy of the region, but that Hamas is more a threat to them than Israel is. We share the same vision with regards to the Palestinian issue. The threat is the same threat also in Lebanon. Hezbollah represents Iran and Lebanon. The moderate parties in Lebanon are on the same side as the international community. In Israel, we all want to see an independent Lebanon that controls all of its territory. I met President Sarkozy in the past. I was deeply impressed by his values, so I expect that we will have a relationship that will be one of understanding and full cooperation. There is no doubt in my mind that this is what we're going to be seeing in the future. I'm sure of that.
Just one personal question. We recall that you severely criticized the Prime Minister for his military intervention in Lebanon in 2005. It's been a year now. Is your alliance with Prime Minister Olmert still solid? Are you going to stay together right to the end in directing Israel? I recall that you asked for him to resign. Is that no longer on the table?
This is the Prime Minister's personal decision. I said what I thought he should do, but I immediately added that I am the foreign minister in his government and I intend to fully cooperate with him and to promote the interests of the State of Israel. This is what I intend to do, and this is what we are doing also since that event. We are a state that is facing threats which are not simple, and everyone from his post, I as foreign minister and he as a prime minister, have to work also together with other ministers in the government. We have to deal with those complex tasks, and I believe we shall overcome.
So the tandem will carry on.
There are other members in the government, but yes.
Very well. This will be the end of our interview, Tzipi Livni. Thank you for having been here with us today on France 24, and we will watch together the news.